In this video, we're going to start looking at the edit page and look at the part strip. Now, I have three instruments loaded in here on parts 1, 2, and 3, and I can trigger them here on three separate MIDI channels. Here's an electric guitar, a bass, and some violins. And we're going to work with these sounds. Now, we can switch parts by clicking here, and it'll update the part, and in the mix page, we can just click here to switch parts and it'll update what's displayed here based on what's loaded into that part. And similarly on the edit page, we see the name of the instrument loaded into the part we're working on, and we can switch parts by clicking over here on the side. And we have the same instrument and multi-menus that we have on the mix page. Now in this video we're going to look at this first horizontal strip here, and this is the part strip. And it's got some really basic functionality that's very powerful. Now we can set the MIDI channel here, and we can also set the volume and pan, and that mirrors what's set on the play page. When we set the MIDI channel here, they're set to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. by default, and the volume and pan, and similarly volume and pan here. Now, when we go to here, we can switch to MIDI channels of the parts, and we can simply create a layered sound by layering two sounds together. Now, for example, this is on MIDI channel 1. I'm triggering MIDI channel 1. I'll select my second part and change that to MIDI channel 1, and now we'll hear both sounds layered together. But there are other things we can do. We can set the polyphony, meaning the number of voices that can simultaneously sound on each part, and they're mostly set to 32 by default, but you can put it all the way up or down lower. And it's a good idea to keep it fairly low and not go much higher than what you need. You'll save some computer resources. And when you have it set low, let's say I have it set to 4, for example, and I hit 5 notes, and I exceed the available amount of polyphony, we'll get a little exclamation mark next to the number. So you can see that little exclamation, click it, and it'll clear. Now we can transpose, and that'll shift the incoming MIDI notes, so it doesn't actually stretch the samples. We get into that in this next section here, but we can transpose, so I can put it down an octave if I want. And if you command click, it'll snap it back to unity value. And when you're dragging in these fields, if you use the shift key, you'll get fine increments, finer movement, rather than just dragging coarsely. We can set a low note and high note range, and by doing this, it'll allow us to create a split in the keyboard. Now let's say in this example, I want the bass to happen only in a lower octave, and I want the guitar to start only a bit higher up in the range. I can split based on notes. So right now the bass is playing through the whole range, and I'll switch to the guitar and have that start maybe only at, let's say, D2. So I'm going to get bass for the entire keyboard, range of the keyboard, and the guitar and bass together, only starting at D2. And similarly, if I want, I can then go to the bass and have that end at D2 if I want to really split them completely. So I can go like that. And let's play them. We have those two notes overlapping. So I'd switch this down to C sharp. Let me hold the shift key to get fine movement. There we go, makes it a lot easier. So you can split your keyboard or layer different sounds together, and we layer by setting the same MIDI channel, and we split by setting the low and high note range for the individual parts. We can split completely or split only in sections of the keyboard and then layer in other sections. Let's put them both wide open right now. And the other thing we can do is we can layer based on velocity, meaning that the harder you hit, that'll depend what's going to be triggered. Now right now they're both wide open, meaning that all velocities are going to trigger both of these sounds. But let's say I want the guitar to only kick in at higher velocities. Well, I'll set a minimum velocity, and we'll do that in this field over here for velocity, and I'll say that, let's say, only after, 106 will the guitar kick in. So before that we're going to hear the bass, and after that we'll hear it together. And I have this little monitor up here so you can see the incoming velocities. When I hit quietly, you'll see the velocities there. And if I hit harder, we'll see two together and hear two together. So you can come up with some interesting playing or performance type of setups like that. course, we can do the same thing by setting a velocity split if we want, rather than layering. So here I have this starting only at 106, and I can have, let's say, the bass end at 106, and that way we won't get them layered, but we'll just have them separated by velocity. But it's fun when you can layer sounds based on velocity. You get some nice expressive performance type of parameters. Now we can pan and set the volume for each sound, and as I mentioned earlier, that mirrors what we can do in the play and mix page. And finally, we have this zone control, and that's why I loaded in the third instrument. Not all instruments are set to respond to this, but some instruments, and a lot of them are the orchestral ones and the pianos, when you enable the zone button, you'll see some of the zones shaded a different color of red, and what that means is they're available to be edited on a zone-by-zone basis. Now, for example, this sound, let me play it for you. Let's go to MIDI channel 3 here. It's a pizzicato string. Now I can click on one of these, and I'm then able to edit some of these parameters and have it apply only to that zone. So just to give you a dramatic example, let's say I'll edit the panning of that zone all the way to the right. Now when I hit in this range here, the notes will be panned. And if I click with the mouse, you'll see it snap to the panning that's set for the entire instrument. And when I snap here, or click here, it snaps up to the value that's set for that specific range. And while I'm here, another thing to be aware of, when you're clicking on the keyboard to audition sounds, it's velocity sensitive. The farther you hit at the top, the quieter it is. And as you move down the key, it'll trigger a louder velocity. So per zone editing, when this button is enabled and we have some of the notes highlighted in red, we can then set many of these parameters uniquely for that zone. So that's a little sort of introduction to the idea of zone editing. We have the mute and solo buttons here, again available per part, and that's the same as we see in the play and mix pages. And that's the part strip, and we'll continue with more in the next video.